I never imagined that moving into Oakwood Estates would escalate into an ongoing clash of wills with the most self-entitled neighbor I had ever encountered. The community appeared ideal at first glance: meticulously maintained homes, a shared swimming pool, and affordable Homeowners Association dues. What the realtor conveniently omitted was that the HOA was dominated by Karen Wilkins, a woman in her mid-50s with highlighted blonde hair styled in that unmistakable "I need to speak to your manager" cut. My problem started 3 weeks after I settled in. I had planted native wildflowers in my front yard to draw butterflies and conserve water. They were fully compliant with the HOA rules. I had reviewed the bylaws carefully before planting anything. Nevertheless, there she stood on my doorstep at 7:30 on a Saturday morning, armed with a clipboard and dressed in a bright neon yellow vest emblazoned with HOA President in bold lettering across the chest. "Those weeds need to be removed immediately," Karen declared, with a tight smile that never reached her eyes. "The HOA has strict landscaping guidelines." "They're not weeds," I replied calmly. "They're native wildflowers, approved under Section 4.3 of the bylaws. They're drought-resistant and beneficial for local pollinators." Karen's smile wavered for a brief moment. "Well, they look like weeds to me, and as president, I have the final say on these matters. I'll expect them gone by Monday, or you'll face a $100 per day fine." Before I could reply, she thrust a violation notice into my hand and strode away, her white sneakers clicking sharply against the sidewalk. I refused to remove the wildflowers. Instead, I emailed the entire HOA board, attaching photographs of my garden along with highlighted portions of the bylaws that expressly allowed native plantings. I included Karen in the message. I received no reply, but the threatened fine never appeared. Round 1 went to me, but Karen was far from finished. Over the following 2 months, violation notices arrived for every conceivable infraction. My trash cans allegedly were visible from the street longer than 12 hours after pickup. They weren't. My garage door was left open while I tinkered with my car, perfectly permitted. Even the color of my garden hose, despite there being no rule whatsoever about hose colors. Each time, I responded politely with the relevant bylaw reference. And each time, Karen's frustration mounted. "You think you're so clever," she snapped one evening as I retrieved my mail. She had clearly been waiting for me. "Just because you can quote bylaws doesn't mean you belong here. Some of us have standards." I smiled politely. "I appreciate your dedication to the neighborhood, Karen. Have a great evening." It became evident that Karen's problem wasn't with my adherence to the rules. It was personal. Perhaps having a resident who knew the regulations as thoroughly as she did challenged her authority. Working remotely as a software developer meant frequent deliveries of packages and important documents to my home. I began noticing that some expected mail never arrived, though I initially attributed it to typical postal delays. It wasn't until my neighbor Jeff brought it up that alarm bells rang. "I thought it was weird," he said, leaning over our shared fence. She had one of those mail forwarding forms in her hand and was glancing around like she didn't want to be seen. The next day, I contacted the local post office and learned that a mail forwarding request had indeed been filed in my name, redirecting everything to an unfamiliar address. The clerk provided the address, and a quick online property record search confirmed my worst suspicion. It belonged to Karen. "This is a federal offense," the postal worker stated gravely. "Mail fraud and mail theft are serious crimes. Would you like to file a formal complaint?" I reflected on all the harassment I had endured from Karen over the past few months. I considered the missing package that held an expensive graphics card essential for a work project. I considered the credit card statement I never received, which led to a late payment fee. "Yes," I replied firmly, "I would." The postal inspector took my statement and evidence with utmost seriousness. They explained that mail fraud carries penalties of up to 5 years in federal prison and fines up to $250,000. While I didn't expect Karen to receive the maximum penalty, the gravity of the situation was not lost on me. 2 days later, I was working from home when I heard a commotion outside. Peering through my window, I watched 2 postal inspectors and a local police officer approach Karen's front door. I couldn't hear their conversation, but I could see Karen's face shift from confusion to indignation to genuine fear as they spoke. She gestured wildly, pointed toward my house, and eventually retreated inside with the officials. Later that evening, the HOA vice president, a reasonable man named Michael, called an emergency board meeting that all residents were encouraged to attend. I sat quietly in the back of the community center as Michael explained the situation in diplomatic terms. It has come to the board's attention that our president has been involved in activities that do not reflect the values of our community, Michael said, clearly choosing his words with care. Karen Wilkins has been temporarily removed from her position pending an investigation into alleged mail tampering, which, as many of you know, is a federal offense. The room erupted in murmurs. Karen wasn't present, but her husband sat in the corner, staring at the floor with a mortified expression. Michael continued. The board wishes to apologize to the affected resident and assures the community that we are cooperating fully with authorities. We will be reviewing all recent violation notices issued by Ms. Wilkins to ensure they were legitimate and in accordance with our bylaws. After the meeting, several neighbors approached me to express their support. It turned out I wasn't the only one who had endured Karen's overzealous enforcement. The woman had been terrorizing the neighborhood for years, using her position to settle personal vendettas and enforce rules that didn't exist. 3 weeks later, I received a certified letter from the district attorney's office. Karen had been charged with mail fraud, a felony offense. She was facing up to 3 years of probation, a $5,000 fine, and permanent removal from the HOA board. The letter also informed me that a significant amount of my mail had been recovered from her home, including the missing graphics card and several personal letters. The day after the charges became public, I encountered Karen in the local grocery store. The once proud HOA president now appeared diminished, her shoulders hunched and her expression haunted. When she spotted me, she froze in the middle of the cereal aisle. "You've ruined my life," she hissed, with quiet venom. "I've been let go from my job at the real estate office. Do you know what a criminal record does to a real estate license?" I placed a box of cereal in my cart before responding. "I didn't ruin your life, Karen. You committed a federal crime. There are consequences for that, just like there are consequences for having wildflowers in your yard. Except one of those is actually against the law." Karen's face flushed crimson as she processed my words. For once, she had no clever retort, no bylaws to quote, no authority to hide behind. She simply stood there, the reality of her situation finally sinking in. Without another word, she abandoned her shopping cart and hurried toward the exit, leaving behind the trappings of her former reign as Oakwood Estates' most feared resident.